All right, this is the PWI podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle. My co-host Brian Solomon out on assignment. I think he is very much in book promoting season now, filling in my buddy Jason McVeigh, PWI contributing writer, who barely got to get a word in edgewise in the last episode. So very much wanted to get him back. How's it going, Jason?
All good, thank you. Bit under the weather this week, but happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. And we got the boss this week, PWI editor-in-chief Kevin McElvaney, and for good reason. What are we talking about today, Kevin?
We are talking about the newly released PWI 500 issue. So that's a lot to get into. It's out digitally right now. You can go to pwi-online.com. You can pre-order the print edition. Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, this is the 35th annual, right?
Yes, 35th annual. Wow.
Oof. Yeah, crazy. I did the math before we got on. I've been around for 19 of those, which is blows my mind. Yeah. Saying it out loud. And yeah, I mean, it's about the biggest thing we do. I think it's kind of like one of our real signatures in the wrestling business. It's the one time of the year where PWI is on the mouths of a lot of people, very often to say, "Oh, this dumb list, we don't care about it," and let's talk about it ad nauseum and dissect it up and down. So like ready for that, ready for the hate and all that. But before we get into individual placements, how do you think this year's list holds up? Is there something that really jumps out about it? I don't feel like it should be particularly controversial this year.
To me, that's the interesting thing. We never set out to make this controversial.
No.
We know sometimes
there are years that we know it will be, right?
Yeah.
When maybe a particularly prominent figure doesn't do as well as some would have expected, or the Miz at number one, we knew we were going to catch some fire.
Sure. And we do have, we can get into this a little later, but we do have some wrestlers who are very high level stars, but who did not wrestle enough matches this year too, which you talk about in your take in this issue after the section itself. Like, is it a good thing to have a strict activity requirement? Should it be amended somewhat? Should there be exceptions? For better or worse, we've kept it the same for a while now, and it does leave out some big names. So I think we can get into that during this discussion, some of those names that are left out. But I think the top 10 is very solid. There's it comes together as, I don't think that would be the exact top 10 any one of us would have selected. Mm-hmm. It's a consensus. So like our committee gets those wrestlers on the top 10 and in a certain order. I think we all felt pretty good about the top 10 as a collective effort when it was done. But I mean, I think it's hard to argue that those are 10 of the, most significant names in all of pro wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you said, I could quibble about this guy is a little too low, this guy is a little too high, but this is done by committee and I think reflects that. As far as because we run into this every year, somebody who thinks their favorite or the best technical wrestler, Zack Sabre Jr. should be. Spoiler alert: Zack Sabre Jr. is not number one at PWI of 500, but you're going to get the people who say he should be because he's such a great wrestler, or The Rock should be because he's the biggest star in wrestling, or something like that. So, talk a bit about the criteria here.
Yeah, so the criteria, we take the star power and the technical ability into account. I really think the biggest thing that we take into account is in-ring achievement. So we look at how people performed in their matches. Did they win most of their matches? Did they win the big matches when it really counted? Did they hold major championships of note? If so, how long did they hold them for? Did they hold multiple championships, perhaps? When they were doing each of these things, did they win, like, maybe not a championship, but something like the Royal Rumble or a Money in the Bank match? These are like these are accolades. So we look at in-ring accolades, and everybody you see near the top of the list has some major accolades in there, whether or not they had a world championship, and a lot of them did near the top of the list. These are people who are main eventing shows, performing at the highest level, picking up some key wins. And then you have technical ability. That is something that we take into consideration as well. It doesn't mean that someone has to be like on the mat the best scientific wrestler, but it's kind of, are their matches exciting? Are they putting in a lot of effort in the ring? Are they generally appreciated as in-ring athletes by wrestling fans? And then we have the activity requirement, which I alluded to up top. So that's a minimum activity requirement of 10 singles matches. It used to just be 10 matches, but now we have a tag team 100 list. So essentially we want to have this geared toward singles stars and the tag team list geared toward tag team activity. So it's 10 singles matches or 6 matches in separate months. So in other words, like the evaluation period is 12 months. 6 of those months during that period, the wrestler needs to have at least 1 match, or they can have 10 total. A little bit confusing. I get where people get caught up on that. It does rule some people out, but the intention behind that is to have like the really part-time wrestlers who hardly are competing. It's not, you could have someone like, I think years ago we had Brock Lesnar who did not qualify. Yeah. He was champion like almost the entire time, but he hardly wrestled. So it's to kind of eliminate that, because it's not pro holding a championship for a certain amount of months illustrated. It's Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So you have to have like a baseline of in-ring activity. We also have competition, which is an important one. So that's both quality of competition and diversity of competition. So if you're just beating a bunch of enhancement talent, you're not going to rank as highly as someone who is defeating the top level talent. If you are only kind of wrestling the same person over and over again, that's potentially a knock against you, because we look for diversity of competition and people who go out there and, challenge themselves in the ring. Am I missing any other criteria? I think I got all of them.
I think that's it. I mean, is influence up there? I mean,
influence. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Influence is the one that is sort of hard to quantify.
Right.
But it's sort of like The Rock isn't on the list either, but it's what The Rock would have going for him.
But and it is important for sure. Yeah, like that's someone like,
I don't know if you call it star power. I don't know if you call, just sort of like your place in the business.
100%. And I think that actually is important. And at the high level of the list, where people have sort of similar accolades, that's what sort of sets them apart. Like who is really influential over their promotion, over the industry as a whole. So it really is, even though it was listed last, it is one of the top criteria that we consider.
Yeah, absolutely. We get into it. I mean, we're going to focus on the top 10, but obviously sometimes too much is made about the top 10, because I think especially this year, it is a crowded field with a lot of great talent in the business, and it's no shame being 11, 15, 20, 30. I mean, you're still talking about being the elite among the elite. Obviously, if you made into the top 10, you're that much better in the eyes of this committee. So let's get into it. Who is this year's number 1 ranked wrestler?
This year's number 1 ranked wrestler, second year in a row, is Cody Rhodes. Nice hint there.
or something. Yes, Cody Rhodes repeats in the number 1 spot. Look, a terrific year. I gotta say, he wasn't my first choice. I had to kind of be brought on board. But once I heard the argument, I thought he was the clear choice. And I think it's pretty unequivocal, actually. Jason, talk about Cody Rhodes' evaluation period. I was gonna say his year, but it really is middle of last year into middle of this year. So it straddles 2 world title reigns.
We should spell it out too in case anyone didn't. It's August 1st, 2024 to July 31st, 2025.
When did he win the belt back? That was
just after.
Yeah. What was even the event? I'm forgetting already. That wasn't
SummerSlam.
Yeah. So he didn't have it at the
end, but he won King of the Ring. Well, Jason, go ahead. I'm
yes, please.
Cody's year.
Yeah. So I think that's the key thing for people to remember, because I think, when people look at the list, it's very easy to think, okay, that's January 1st to December 31st or whatever it might be. It's as Kevin said, it's August 1st of last year through to July 31st of this year. And so like Cody started the period as the champion. So you had from August last year right through to WrestleMania this year when he lost the belt to John Cena. So straight away, that gave him most of the year holding what we view, I guess, as the top singles title in all of wrestling. Say the King of the Ring was in there as well. He missed some time in there as well, which didn't hurt him. I think, a lot of times we will take that into consideration, but when Cody
and we did talk about it during the meeting.
It wasn't a lot.
Sure.
A couple months, maybe.
Yeah. We did take it into account to some degree. Yeah.
I think, and for other people, that may harm their case a little. But when Cody was WWE champion, he was so active that far outweighed kind of any time that he had missed. I mean, he had a lot of title defenses when he was champion. And so, I mean, for me, I kind of look at it. I spent a lot of time working on the weekly ratings that we have for the PWI website, as well as the monthly print magazine ratings. And those are kind of a microcosm of the PWI 500 throughout the year. And I would advise and urge anybody who maybe isn't sure of how we look at these things to maybe keep an eye on our weekly ratings on the website, check out the ratings section of the magazine, because although it's not, 100% what we base it off, it does kind of show you what we are evaluating, what we consider to be valuable, and it plays a big part in the PWI 500 ranking. And over the past year, Cody came out on top on the weekly ratings, or the weekly top 10, and the print ratings top 10 more than anybody else did.
Yeah, I'd say he didn't have quite the year he had last year. Sure. In not just because of the one loss to John Cena, which I actually don't think is that much of a black mark, but also you talked about diversity of opponents, and I put together that top 10. So I'm the one seeing who he wrestled, and there wasn't that much of it. He had Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam, and then it was, I think, 3 PLEs in a row, and maybe also a Saturday Night's Main Event with Kevin Owens. I mean, Kevin Owens was a big chunk of the value. He won them all. I mean, he
and that's a high level competitor. So
it's the high, yeah.
But it is just one guy, yeah.
Yeah, so he wasn't kind of knocking him down like he did the previous year. But he's Cody Rhodes. He is the biggest star. We talk about influence, and that being a part of it. He's the biggest star in wrestling. And one thing that I wanted to talk about Cody, and not to get like too a saccharine, but I think it's something that's sometimes not talked about enough, and it's that he's a really good representative for WWE and for the pro wrestling business. And I think about coming off of Hulk Hogan's death and how sort of kind of ugly that got when discussing his very complicated legacy. And he's not, and it's not to single him out. I mean, I think so many of the biggest stars in wrestling history, you've had this dichotomy where you praise what they do in the ring or on TV, but maybe not the best role models outside of that, or have some traits that not necessarily admirable. And I could say that about my hero, the Ultimate Warriors.
Plenty of wrestlers.
Ric Flair, Steve Austin had all kinds of allegations. And I'm not, I don't know, I've talked to him a couple times, but I don't know Cody intimately, but I just think he puts forth like a really positive image for the wrestling industry as a guy who stands for the right things, a family, integrity, hard work. I think his whole story of how he sort of picked himself up after being at the bottom of WWE, and this is already several years old. I mean, this is not a new story. But I just think he always goes out there and really represents himself and represents WWE really well. We talk all the time about how like difficult it could be to win over non-wrestling fans and get them to sort of appreciate what why we like wrestling. I think Cody is a really easy guy to say, look at this guy. Right. He's an athlete. He is he's great with his fans. The fans love him. I mean, that's John Cena represented a lot of the same things for most of his career, but at any given time, half or more of the fans were booing him. And thankfully, that really hasn't been the case with Cody. I mean, he puts forward this really positive character, and the fans love him. So I think WWE just has such a special thing in Cody Rhodes right now.
And it's interesting you mentioned John Cena specifically, because Cody Rhodes is the first repeat back-to-back 500 number one since John Cena. Mm-hmm. And in fact, only 4 wrestlers have ever done this. So he joins a club. It's him, John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart. That's it. Nobody else has ever done back-to-back number ones in the 500 in the 35-year history of the list. So that's some great company to be in.
Yeah, it's the elite of the elite, and a great year. And also, when you talk about the criteria, a really good wrestler. I mean, the guy has great matches, and as Jason mentioned, had the biggest prize in all of wrestling, had it for most of the year. I don't want to say no-brainer because there was discussion and there were some names thrown around, and we'll get to them. But I think the right choice.
Yeah, I think a pretty strong number one. Should we get into the number two? Because there was a strong case made for him as well.
Yeah, I'll have a lot to say about the number two. I may not be as positive.
Well, it's funny because I think you actually, even though you have some negative things to say, I believe you came into the meeting thinking he was possibly our number one guy.
I might be thinking about somebody else then. I may be forgetting. I may be mixing up two with.
No. Okay, I might be mixing you up with somebody else who I was surprised to see was advocating for him. But number two is Jon Moxley.
No, I was right the first time.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you came into the meeting saying he was. No, maybe I'm thinking maybe Brian came in.
No, Brian advocated for. Brian got me on board for Cody.
Okay, somebody came into the meeting and really surprised me that they had Moxley as their number one, and I can't.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been me. I thought he was on. I'll say this much: I think Moxley's a strong number two. I think Moxley absolutely belongs in that number two spot. Again, talking about putting together the top five highlights of their year. Frankly, with some of these guys, it was a little hard to get to five because they didn't have the years. With Moxley, it was hard to leave stuff off because it was really an impressive list of defenses and wins on top, headlining pay-per-views. On paper, a great year, and he was a dominant champion in the number two promotion in the world, and I think a strong number two. That's the good, I'll say. We'll get back to that. How about you, Kevin? I mean, what do you think about the year that Moxley had?
So one thing that struck me earlier, and I feel since Brian's not here, I should bring up what he brings up every year. And that is the anti-heel bias of the PWI 500.
Yeah, which makes it that much more impressive that he got as many wins as he did.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what ends up happening is because we're looking at this in terms of in-ring achievement, and people call it a kayfabe list. It is and it isn't. I mean, I'm okay with people saying it is in that, like, it's based on the predetermined results of matches. It heavily is. And in that same spirit, we also look at, okay, is someone getting a lot of fluke wins? Like if someone is getting a lot of, like, they barely pulled it out, they only won because somebody else interfered. Like, we take this all into consideration. We still count it as a win, but it's a win sort of with an asterisk. And I think in as much as there could have been a case for Moxley at number one, there's a certain amount of that. There's also a certain amount of, by the end of his reign, fans were very ready. And so I think some of this is a credit to him as a character. Some of it is that storyline had really kind of run its course. And the way that the Death Riders were booked, and it was very samey. And there's an argument for doing that because it gets fans so riled up and ready for a title change that they're thrilled when it finally happens. But I think most people felt like, who were following the product closely, like it was almost overdue when he finally lost to Hangman Page. So I think had he been had he taken part in a slightly more popular championship reign, there's a stronger case for him at number one. There's also the argument that even though it was quote unquote unpopular, certain metrics were up. Live attendance was not, but pay-per-view was. Television was doing very well under Moxley for a time, year over year. So there's just, it's a complicated thing, but certainly he had the world title in AEW for, a good chunk of the evaluation period. He faced a pretty wide array of challengers and like mostly higher level challengers. So, I think like, now that it's a couple of months out, I don't know if people will start to look a little more favorably upon that reign, but I know, it was, again, a little bit controversial. And I know you had some things specifically to say in the right panel.
Yeah,
yeah.
So I mean, a little bit of a contradiction. I could both say I think he's a strong number 2 and deserves a spot there and had a really good year, and is probably my least favorite wrestler to watch these days. And it again sort of a contradiction. I also think in some ways, I don't want to say the worst year of his career, but I think he did
you can't say that.
But I think he did himself a lot of harm in. I give him a ton of credit, like sort of like Bray Wyatt and some others, that he had a vision. He has a vision in his head for a certain character and a certain act, and it's almost sort of performance art. And I think he was sort of unflinching and unapologetic about pursuing this presentation of myself. I think even after it became really clear that, I don't want to say, look, he's got his supporters. I thought it became unwatchable. The act, the matches, the gore. It is, to me, channel changing heat. I can't watch Jon Moxley anymore. I really, and it's a shame because I think he's such a super talent.
You've been a really big supporter of his in the past as well. Like when his early AEW work.
Absolutely. I think he's got all the tools.
Yeah.
And not to dump on Tony Khan, but I do think that this speaks to sort of like a lot of the criticism I've had about AEW about not having that strong hand on top, sort of leading a certain vision. And some of these guys require editors, and it sometimes feels like Moxley very much is sort of just doing his own thing without much consideration. When you think about it, didn't make my top 5 highlights of the year, but when I think about what will his 24-25 be remembered for, and it might be that reaction of fans on the front row when a referee is pulling a bat or wherever it was with nails that have now stuck into his skin and won't come off, and you see the skin pulling off of his back. And I'm just like, what the hell? I mean, is this really what we've gotten to with this guy? So I just hate the act. Super talented. Here's me being diplomatic. Super talented, like a fantastic guy, belongs on top in any promotion he works for. Time to move on from this act. It's unwatchable.
Jason, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too, especially like with having been, because I remember like you bringing some of these metrics in to the meeting, like people, how they performed in the monthly ratings, how they performed in the weekly ratings, and how that played in. And I know we kind of went back and forth about Moxley and the number 3 spot guy, which you can feel free to mention while you're talking about this.
Yeah, well, whenever we had the initial committee meeting, I did not have Jon Moxley at number 2, but by the time we were finished, I was a pretty firm believer that number 2 was actually the perfect spot for him. I was quite staunch on Cody being number 1, but by the time the meeting was over, I was like, you know what, Moxley earned that number 2. In terms of the weekly and the monthly print ratings, Moxley did come out on number 1 in those a number of times throughout the year. He had big match victories, which is pay-per-view main event victories, which is something we value a lot when it comes to ranking this. There is no denying that the booking of the whole Death Riders thing was an albatross that he had to wear. I think there's something to be said for he overcame a lot of that with some of the things that he did and some of the big match performances that he had. Yes, I get what you're saying, Al, is that at times it was a very acquired taste, some of the things that he did. But I think he was also a steady hand for AEW at a time when they desperately needed someone because they had been through the hot potato of the belt going back and forward and the whole CM Punk stuff and Bryan Danielson. Moxley
like 3 different times he's been that guy too. I know he's had four world title, but like he's like 3 different periods where he's had to step up and fulfill that.
I don't know that, and I agree with that. Certainly post Punk, which is now a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But he took the belt off of Bryan Danielson, and was anybody in a rush to get the belt off of Bryan Danielson?
Well, Bryan Danielson,
off of Swerve. Who was anybody in the belt a rush to? I mean, I think
that's a fair argument. I think Swerve should have like if I were booking, I would have had Swerve win the championship back at Dynasty. I'll say this right now, and I think I've spoken with Jason about this, just like in daily conversations, because we try to have a friendly phone call and we end up talking about regular, just work and wrestling. But I think if Swerve had regained the championship in April's Dynasty pay-per-view, had a couple of solid defenses, I think there's potentially a case for him at number 1 this year. But it did not happen, so it's sort of a moot point.
Yeah. And I Moxley's a complicated guy. I mean, the thing I'd say about him, sort of the Death Riders thing being an albatross on him, if it was, I think it's largely of his own doing. I mean, I this feels like John Moxley. Right. I mean, the whole angle, the plastic bags on people's heads, it beyond warrants welcome. And Kevin, you talked about sort of like, and I agreed. And I think we've talked about this on the show, this idea of like, build the heat. So when finally he's dethroned, you've got Cody ending his story and beating Roman Reigns. And there's this release of joy. And there was some of that. But I think also a lot of it was like, all right, whatever. Let's just get this belt, off of him. I think it was less like, jubilation and more just sort of like relief, like, okay. And you know what? I don't even know how much good it did, because the act didn't change and the Death Riders are still doing their thing and Moxley's still doing his thing. And I'm still not a fan.
Well, that's different taste, right? That's
yeah.
I should I think we should get on to number 3, honestly.
Yes.
But like, I think a lot of this, it's worth noting that even within our committee, and this is our number 2 ranked wrestler, and here are 3 of the people on the committee, and we're saying he had some knocks against him this year, but that shows how high his highs were. So it is worth noting that he wouldn't be in this spot. These are maybe the things that kept him from number 1, but again, a strong number 2.
Yeah. Number 3 is Gunther, and number 3 was my pick for number 1 going into
okay. I knew you didn't come in with Cody. That's where I got confused.
Right, and I've got to say, in retrospect, I think I got it wrong, and I think maybe there might have been some recency bias going on there, because this was a little after he regained the title from Jey, and he's sort of riding high now. 2 world title reigns, dominated. I think there's an argument for him at the number 2 spot. And I'm fine with where he is, but I think there's definitely an argument for him at the number 2 spot, but not number 1. But for that 2-month stretch where Jey had the title, he wore the heavyweight title for basically the entire evaluation period, won it at the very beginning. Pretty dominant champion. I think a couple of big marks against him. The Jey Uso loss was one, and being submitted at WrestleMania in the opening match, that's all really bad luck. And the other is that he lost to the number 1 wrestler, Cody Rhodes, at Crown Jewel cleanly. He took the L cleanly, but a terrific wrestler. To sort of like a quote of my former co-host that we had on last week, Dan Murphy, a wrestler's wrestler. He's like your favorite wrestler's favorite wrestler kind of thing. And also, I think, and now having cycled through 2 world title reigns and so much gold over his career, he brags a lot about 80 or 85% of his time in WWE he has worn some kind of championship. It does feel like, given all that, he should be higher than he is in wrestling, and it's all to say that I think something is still missing there. And I touched on it in my write-up, and I think both what makes him special is potentially what's holding him back a little bit, and that is that he is so no nonsense. And the reality is WWE likes a little bit of nonsense. And and it's not to say that they should send him out next week with a little cowboy hat or anything like that. And they very much should not. But I do think that there's sort of a ceiling for a character like this, and the reality is he's never been like the top guy. He's not a guy that they headline pay-per-views with unless he's working with a Cody Rhodes or a CM Punk. So they've always been a little gun shy. And I think it's just the reality that there's only so much appetite for the guy who is just, a killer and has really strong chops and is just sort of like the Ivan Drago of WWE. But all that said, I mean, I'm a fan. I think he's terrific, and I think he did a lot of terrific work, and I think he grew a lot. I mean, I think about some of that promo work with Jey and with Goldberg, and he's still getting better at this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so one thing that jumps out to me, and I think this is going to be relevant later in the top 10. We were talking about, I think Jason brought up earlier that we sort of, the WWE, the Undisputed Championship, it's effectively the strongest world championship in professional wrestling, period, right now. The World Heavyweight Championship, not so much. There's literally not even a lineage to that title that beyond a couple of years ago when they introduced it. They didn't reintroduce it because the World Heavyweight Championship, the big gold belt that Triple H wore for a lot of the aughts, that is part of the Undisputed title. Like, it was absorbed into that. You can't then excise it from that combined title reign and then have it be its own thing again. It's not how it works. I mean, you can, but it's cheap and nobody believes it. So with that in mind, and even if that were the same championship, this is the secondary world title in WWE. So whoever has it, unless they're really delivering and there's really inconsistency with that top title, they're going to have a hard time outranking whoever's on that other side.
Well, Seth made its number one a couple of years ago.
He did, and I think that was because he had the exceptional string of performances, and he defended it so much against so many people. And then you had Roman, who, while still holding the championship, was
never working.
Yeah, not coasting exactly, but it was like he was on the wane with that run. And so I think that's going to be a disadvantage. And again, it's not impossible because, as you said, Seth a couple years ago was number one, but I think it's going to be harder for someone. However, I mean, I think there was a case, as you said, for him at number two, and I think Jason could speak to that with the weekly and monthlies. I think, didn't you tallied up like points essentially, right? For the
So checking out old issues of PWI, in the print magazines, they used to assign points and tally them throughout the year. And so that was something I just quietly did in the background. And I had Gunther coming out just behind Cody in terms of how often he topped those weekly and monthly lists. I had him at my number two. I think number three is probably the right place he ended up whenever looking at it between him and Moxley. I think Gunther was champion, as you said, Al, for a lot of that, but he also didn't defend it that much. He took great chunks of time in between those. And just what Kevin was saying there, I think, is the biggest thing, is that even on events where Cody and Gunther were both defending those belts, Cody was always positioned higher. Mm-hmm. The Undisputed title was always positioned as much more valuable than the belt that Gunther had. If you had asked me a few years ago, do I think that Gunther would be number one in the coming years, I would have said absolutely. I kind of sit here now today wondering, is his best opportunity at being number one gone without him ever actually getting there? I hope I'm wrong. I hope he does have big things ahead, because I think he's the kind of guy now who WWE will look at and think, okay, if we need to take the belt off someone, Gunther's the guy that we're putting it back on, because we can rely on him to be taken seriously. He'll have these great matches. The fans will take him seriously as a champion, and we know we can always revert back to him. But I'm kind of worried that he's now going to slot into that position of...
I think that's what he was this year, right? I mean, with the whole Jey Uso experiment, I mean, I think they did 2 months and they realized, and I don't know that I agree with him, and we'll get into that, but I think they made the call like, this isn't really working. Let's just put it back on Gunther.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, it's a double-edged sword. It means that he will probably always be a prominently positioned wrestler in WWE, but it comes with that caveat of there will be someone else ahead of him likely.
Yeah. What do you think, either of you, of the prospect of him as a babyface? That's one thing they haven't really tried. Again, a little bit kind of like against casting, right? When you think of like what this character historically has been, but I also worry sort of like if you've got what you're going to get out of him as a heel, and does that fresh coat of paint do anything, and how well does this character work as a babyface?
I thought that might have been happening with the handshake with Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
And just to touch on that a wee moment, that when we talk about, strength of competition and stuff, Gunther's match with Pat McAfee was a match where Pat McAfee looked way better and got way more offense in than he possibly should have.
Right? I mean, that's also an issue. Two of his biggest, marquee matches of this year, he probably gave a lot more than he should have.
Yeah, which I think negatively impacts him when we look at things like this. He's not dominating, top guys in the business. He's having really competitive, close matches that he could almost lose to a Pat McAfee or a Goldberg or whatever it might be.
Well, Goldberg was after the evaluation period, I believe, right?
No.
Was that just before? Okay.
Yeah. No, that was Memorial Day weekend, I think. Is that right? It was Saturday Night's Main Event.
No, I mean, it wasn't that. Oh, you're right. No, it was opposite All In. Yeah. So it was during the evaluation period.
Yeah. And but I really agree. Another thing that I wonder that I've heard as a criticism that I think has kind of stuck and certainly, I think about a lot, and it came from Bret Hart, who I think I might, whose name I might bring up a couple of times in this a top 10, and that is this issue of like, or is his stiff style really praiseworthy, or is it just bad work? Is it just like, you're stiffing the crap out of these guys, and it's a spectacle. It's fun to watch, but at the end of the day, he's just chopping the crap out of these guys, and it seems like it really hurts.
I go back and forth with this. I first of all, I mean, it's hard for me to disagree with anything Bret Hart says if he's talking about in-ring work, because come on, one of the greatest of all time. There's an argument for greatest in-ring worker and some depending on what you're looking at. But certainly one of my favorites. But I think it's kind of Bret Hart was wrestling in a different era where, certainly a lot of people knew that it was choreographed, predetermined, whatever. People weren't, it's a little bit exaggerated how many people outside of children still believed it was real. But I think, nowadays you need to do more to get a reaction out of people. And sometimes the best thing to do is to blend some actual reality in that. Now these chops, I'm sure they hurt like hell. You can visibly see that they hurt like hell. But they are relatively safe compared to dropping someone on their head or something like that. Like it's a safe-ish way of having a really physical match that will get a reaction out of the crowd. So I understand why people do it. Does it become a bit of a crutch for some people? Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Gunther's just so much fun to watch. It's hard for me to hold that against him.
And some extent, there's always been guys. I mean, I think about Stan Hansen. I think about Bruiser Brody. Right? These guys were stiffing the crap out of opponents too, and that's what made them great. Right? So it's not that new a thing. But yeah, I do worry. The worry you just mentioned is a good one. Does it become a crutch?
Sure.
Just lay into guys. But also in his defense, maybe that's what makes him a really good wrestler is that it is safe and that's where the magic is, right? That we could criticize like, oh, you're just beating the crap out of these guys and I don't know necessarily for him, but very often you hear wrestlers say that the guys who look the stiffest are actually the safest, and you barely feel some of that. I don't sense that's not with the welts
and bruises it leaves, but
but it also makes him different. He's a very different wrestler compared to even the rest of the 9 guys on our top 10. Which I think helps him.
Good point. Number 4, Hangman Adam Page, the reigning AEW world champion, a guy I've come around more on. I mean, even a few months ago, I don't know that I would have accepted him this high on the 500. I think it's a fine place for him now. And Jason, you talked about Moxley being kind of like the guy that the right champion for the time and carrying AEW when they need him. I sort of think that was Page's role this year, at least since winning the world title.
Page was very much the chaser this year, which served him well. Like he was perfect in that position of, and this is a story that's been building for a couple of years of Adam Page's climb back towards the world title. Like that's been a huge, even at times a subtle storytelling element of AEW, which they're not always known for being so subtle. But Adam Page's climb back there has been a huge part of it. I'll be honest, whenever initially looking at this, I didn't have him that high, but once you look into the actual criteria, he barely lost a match.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he won a lot of matches. Excuse me. And that matters, you know, it really, really does. And it's not a recency bias thing with him becoming world champion. Wins and losses matter, which has got him, you know, the 4th spot on our list.
He beat, and we haven't gotten to some of these names yet, but he beat every AEW wrestler in the top 10 in a singles match, including Moxley, obviously. Even though I guess that would have been after the evaluation period, or not?
No, it was just, he won the title. But he beat him a second time. Oh, he actually beat him twice.
Right. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And won the Owen and did a lot. So, you know, when you know, I think about him as my kid has gotten me into football some later, and being in New York here. The New York Jets had Aaron Rodgers, the big name a quarterback who, you know, I don't want to say flunked out, but only helped so much. And now they're very much in a different direction. The rebuilding phase, you take the guy who a more homegrown and you put him in that position. That sort of feels like what they're doing with Page. And AEW has had a lot of setbacks. And so I think it's very important that they've got your champion says a lot about you as a promotion. And I think Hangman's for a lot of the reasons I brought up Cody Rhodes. I think he's a good representative for the company. I think he's essentially homegrown. I think he's a really good wrestler without being sort of needlessly flashy, as some people in AEW can be and are criticized for. I think his mic skills have gotten really good, and I think he's got a real connection with the audience that he's built over years and years. Some of it, the story that Jason says brought up that they've been telling for a while. Mm-hmm. So I think it all came together. And if you told me months ago that, you know, All In their big stadium show of the year, it would be him winning, I would have thought colossal mistake. You know, how is that this not Will Ospreay's position? And I think it was the right call in retrospect.
I actually remember having this conversation with you and Brian months ago, talking about when Moxley was champion, it was growing a little thin. And we said, you know, you have Swerve, you have Ospreay, and you were in agreement on both of those. Like, you could put either of those guys in the top spot. And I mentioned Hangman, and you pushed back against it.
Yeah.
And I said, no, he's turning, like, watch, he's turning a corner. And he did. He was on the climb back up. He leaned back into what made him really lovable before, which some of that was he had to get past this storyline with Swerve. I mean, he had to be able to grapple with that before he could get back to chasing the championship, which, you know, I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the things they did in that storyline, the home invasion, the fire. Some people love that stuff. It's not for me. It's honestly not for me. But once you do that, then yeah, you can't just blow it off in 1 week. You have to have like a series of matches. You have to really take your time getting past that. Like even to the point where Swerve eventually was helping him, you know, you really had to ramp up to that. So I should address this because just from looking at, you know, we're releasing this right as the issue comes out essentially, but looking at feedback even before, I think a lot of people are expecting Hangman at number 1, and that's recency bias. Recency bias because they're looking at right now who is really hot right now, who's been really hot the last few months. He checks all the boxes, as Jason said. You know, he had the big wins. He had, as you said, he won the Owen Cup. So it's not that he doesn't deserve it for the period in question. I think, could you quibble that he's 3 or 2? 2 would be a little high, I think, because Moxley had that length of the reign, even though
and everybody above him had a much longer reign.
Yeah,
he got it the last few weeks of the evaluation period.
Right, exactly, right. So it's just, you know, now if he holds on to this for a good chunk of the current evaluation period, then that's a different story. We'll be talking next year. Sure. You know, the things he's doing right now that we have press lead times, people. Like it's not just us releasing a list to the internet. Go pick up the issue digitally or print. I encourage you, because like we talk about all this stuff. We talk about the criteria. We talk about what people did during the evaluation period. We have to prep this whole issue for digital release and for print. It's being printed as we speak. And it'll be actually getting mailed out this week. as the digital edition rolls out to some of our subscribers. So, there's an evaluation period. It's that simple. So it's just.
And I'll point out our lead time has shrunk a lot over the years, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, we were working on this issue till what, a week ago or something?
Yeah, when we record this, yeah. I mean, like it was the 11th, yeah. So like, no, that's not to say all the rankings reflect that, but like there are other things in the magazine. Like Jason works on the monthly ratings, along with a few others on that committee and myself, but it's that's like right up to the wire.
Yeah, I mean, pretty close by the time we start writing, as you really need to be, because you can't be putting together a list and then have something that shakes everything up a world. And it sort of happened this year. I mean, if we pushed it any further, there are some guys who would be a lot higher on this list because of some stuff that happened.
Sure, and then we'd be reworking the entire list, and then we'd be it's just not feasible at a certain point. But like if you want the most up to date, like Jason, I think actually Hangman's number 1 in the monthly.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely.
So for the monthly rankings, he is. Like, so if you want to see like where we are for the next period, that's where we are for now. So
to invoke Bret Hart for a second time, a page reminds me of when they went with Bret Hart, years ago. And it was both the right decision at the time to make him your guy and the world champion, and also something that frankly I don't think was going to spark a whole lot of business. I mean, putting the world title on Bret Hart, I think, stabilized things at a time that it needed to be stabilized, and also again, the arenas didn't start getting packed. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I have been before on Page. And this was some of my criticism about him was I don't see him as the kind of guy who single-handedly is going to lead a boom period for AEW or drastically turn around business, which is not to say it's not the right thing to go with him, because I think he can help steady the ship.
Yeah, because the current fan base loves him. But I think, and I suspect at least one of the people we're going to talk about in the top 10, you would suggest could grow that audience. But
let's see. And there's actually a couple of candidates for that. But let's move on. So at number 5, our first Japanese star on the top 10. I'll say, is it the only one? He is actually the only one.
Yeah, on the top 10.
Hirooki Goto, who a year ago, I mean, who would have thought this guy would be at number 5? I forget where he was, but he jumped something like 100 spaces or more. I mean, he was basically a tag team wrestler. He'd do really well in the tag team list every year in Bishamon. But everybody thought that this guy's years as even a world title contender in Japan were way behind him, and they did a great job of kind of telling this Cinderella story, Rocky Balboa kind of story, late in his career, and he really got the fans behind him in sort of reminiscent of Kofi Mania or the Yes movement in New Japan, where I think people were looking for that feel-good moment for a guy who had been in the company for so long. And it wasn't just kind of like this flukish title reign. He went on to defend the world title 7 times, I think.
Which is a record for that iteration of the title, I believe. You mentioned in the write-up. Yeah. Since it became the IWGP World Heavyweight in 2020 or 2021. So that's a lot of defenses in Japan. Like those,
It'd be a lot of defenses these days, even in the United States.
100%.
Jason, any thoughts on Goto? How old is he? He's not 50 yet, right? I don't think.
I'll look up Goto's age while Jason's giving.
I don't think he's there yet, but he's not far from there. He's heading that way. This is the one that pleasantly surprised me the most. Yeah. And I think it's just looking at his year. There you go. So he's on his way there, which is maybe quite young in today's wrestling when we look at some people who are main eventing. So. Excuse me. Yeah, he pleasantly surprised me just with the year that he had. And again, not to harken too much back to the kind of weekly and the print ratings that we do throughout the year, but he's another one who came out on top a few times throughout that. Certainly not as much as the other guys ahead of him on the list here, but he had a very impressive year. And I think it was really funny. There was an issue. The weekly ratings that we did on one occasion, we tweeted out that he was #1 on our top 10 list for that week. He had a couple of big title defenses, and he retweeted the tweet, and he talked about how much it actually meant to him to be considered on our list for that, which I think he considers this a huge honor to have been given, the opportunity to run with that, and he made the absolute best of it. And I think it was a strange year for New Japan, where they maybe didn't have, a lot of the big stars that they've had in the past, and didn't have maybe that one person that they were building towards and kind of pinning everything on. And Goto was the steady hand for them, who did a really, really good job with their top belt.
Yeah, you know who that reminds me of? to invoke him the third time. But yeah, it does remind me of what they did with Bret Hart and whatever it is, 30-something years ago. And Jason, I think you're right. I mean, I do think Goto doesn't get this opportunity if they still have Okada and Omega and Will Ospreay and a bunch of other guys who are top guys. And the reality is that, yeah, they don't have that depth of, it's not depth of talent, because, there's no shortage of talent over there, but established main event drawing stars. And in the absence of that, I think they took a chance on Goto, and I think we're pleasantly surprised, right?
Yeah, I was actually shocked how well his reign went. And that's not to say, I've always enjoyed his work. I looked at him as kind of like, the perennial bridesmaid, if he's in the world title scene, kind of a never open weight title scene guy. Like that's some of the most entertaining stuff to watch. I mean, talk about Gunther's hard hitting matches.
Yeah.
Love watching that entire scene, but just, I thought, okay, they really went to a lot of trouble to have Zack Sabre Jr. be put into the position that he was put in. And then they have him lose it. And it's to this veteran who's been around for a long time, who's never won it before. It just seemed like a puzzling choice. And boy, was I proven wrong, because not only did fans love this, like just in terms of the feedback and the social media reaction, attendance was way up under Goto. So he was a draw as champion. It was this great, heartfelt, sentimental story because he had lost his father. And then he was doing this in tribute to him. And then it was this nice full circle moment where he won the championship. He brought his kids into the ring with him. Just really, what did you write in the issue, Al? I think you wrote, if you predicted Hirooki Goto would be in the top 5 for the PWI 500 last year, no, you didn't. It was just, nobody saw it coming.
Yeah.
But a lot of fans were thrilled that it did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. He's making a movie with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns right
now. He's going to be in Street Fighter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you really wondered, like, in as much as that leads to conversations and all that, I mean, is it crazy to think that, we see this?
Who knows? We could
show up in the Royal Rumble,
It's a well-known fact that Hollywood casts based off the PWI 500 rankings.
Yes, absolutely. You're welcome, Goto. Yeah. Number 6, a guy I got a lot to say about, and I think it's a real complicated sort of story with him, Jey Uso. Another guy who I don't know that a lot of people would have thought would be in the top 10, but then also in some ways the fact that he's at 6, some people might look at a little bit as a disappointment. And we just saw it on Unreal. He was, they strapped the proverbial rocket to him, right? I mean, he won a loaded Royal Rumble with John Cena and Roman Reigns and CM Punk, and he outlasted them all. He goes to WrestleMania. He taps out Gunther at WrestleMania, wins the world title. And 2 months later, they're sort of like, maybe not. Like, I think, I feel like some of the issues against Jey Uso are backstage, away from fans. And I also got a sense of that some from Unreal, that they were sort of like dancing around and hinting around with Triple H's sort of like dealings with him, suggesting that maybe there were some issues with work ethic there or what have you. And I think it's really too bad. And again, not knowing some of that stuff, and I don't think a lot of that stuff manifests on screen. I think on screen, what you saw this year was an incredibly popular wrestler. I mean, like a connection like maybe nobody on this list had. I would be real curious how he does in most popular wrestler of the year voting, because I think it's his to win. But the most over guy in wrestling for a good chunk of this year. And yes, some of it is the entrant and some of it is Yeet and all that stuff, but I don't think it's all that. I mean, I think that
that's also part of the act. Like, so sure. Like, you can't like discount that,
And I'll invoke a different name from the 90s that Jey Uso reminds me of a lot, and that's Sting. I mean, I think that there's a likability, and some of it is in the kind of awkwardness, and that his promos are not always sort of like sure-footed, but he feels like a real guy. And I think worked really hard toward this. I think of like the earliest Thunderdome, chapters of the Bloodline story, and Jey Uso was the MVP all along. I mean, I just think he's done such great work over the last several years. I was really happy to see it rewarded, and frankly, really disappointed when they pulled the plug on it. I mean, I absolutely thought it felt premature, not knowing what factors backstage politically might have had a hand in it.
Yeah, I he's another one. Some people ahead of time were kind of like doing the drum roll, expecting him to be number one even. I think if you just go on influence, there's a case for him.
Yeah,
because he was the most popular wrestler for a time, and he had this groundswell of support. Even then, I maybe give the edge to Cody, but it's he's in contention. I think where he falls short is some of these other areas, because his reign was with the championship was short. The Royal Rumble win was huge. I think that. To me, that was one of the most memorable Royal Rumble wins ever, because it's what that match theoretically should be. Anybody can win it, and it should be a star-making moment, or can be a star-making moment. Sometimes you just want whoever to, be reaffirmed. But, he had a great year, but it was in some other ways, yeah, like he didn't have like a long dominant series of wins. He did have the Intercontinental title during the evaluation period as well. So it's not like it was just that one run, but if you compare him to everybody else who's above him, they're all world champions for, with the exception of Page, who won it late, a pretty extensive stretch. And these are all guys who beat like an array of high level talent, didn't take a lot of big losses. And that's sort of when you get into the nitty gritty, which again, these are knocking, like, this is still top 10 wrestlers in the world. It's number 6. This is not us saying he stinks. This is us saying like, this is why he's 6 versus 5 or 4 or 3,
right?
Yeah. That's my take on Jey. I mean, he inarguably had a great year. I would have never predicted years ago, when we had the Usos and when, wrestlers who were primarily in tag matches, like where we had to argue like whether it's Jimmy or Jey at number 100 something, I would have never predicted that he would have been in the top 10 ever.
And he dealt with, there's always that sort of like tag team bias where it's hard to break it on your own. He's literally an identical twin. I mean, like, I don't know if anybody's ever had that more than he did, because you literally for many years you didn't know which one was which at any given time, and he so really distinguished himself as something. I mean, nobody's making that mistake anymore. I mean, I honestly don't know. Is Jimmy in the 500?
Jimmy's in the 500, but he's much lower.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's great. Jason, do you think? And I say this, and he just headlined the last PLE in that 4-way with Seth. But do you get a sense that his world title days are over? Can you foresee him being cycled back into that spot?
I can. Yeah, I think just by the nature of the way WWE is booked, and you have separate brands and you have 2 world titles, I think it's inevitable that he will work his way back there. I think at some point there's enough popularity behind him, and he is good enough to get back there. Whenever he won the world title at WrestleMania, I vividly remember thinking, oh, we have a contender for number 1 here for the PWI 500 this year, because I thought what was going to come was 4 months of him as a fighting champion where he wrestles every week.
Opponents, and they just never got it. I think he beat one guy. He beat Logan Paul. I think that's it. And
he was one and done. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to look at it any other way than a flop. His Royal Rumble win was huge, which is probably what kept him as high as it did on our list. Because I think without that Royal Rumble win, even if he had won the world title and had the same reign, he probably would not have been as high as he did, which is, it's not a fair reflection of the kind of wrestler he is. It may have been a case of he just wasn't ready now, but I think certainly he can go back there.
Yeah. Agree. Number 7, I think there's some parallels with Jey Uso in terms of maybe a guy who wasn't used to his full potential, and that's last year's number 2 ranked wrestler, Swerve Strickland. I gotta say, Kevin, again, putting together those top 5 highlights, I struggled to get 5 with Swerve, because he was in a lot of marquee matches, big ones, but was losing them again and again and again, and didn't have that many really big signature wins over the evaluation period. But his world title reign bled into the early part of the evaluation period, and he still feels like a top guy in AEW who is being. I think they've corrected some of that. It feels like at least the trajectory's in the right direction now. But when he was losing to Lashley and stuff, it really was sort of like, what are you doing with this guy?
Lashley, who we have to mention, Lashley's not on the list. Lashley had 4 singles matches, I think. So he falls well short of what's needed to qualify. So like, it's not even just that he lost to Lashley. Like, the loss to Lashley didn't build anything for Lashley. So it really hurt Swerve in retrospect. I think that's why he's in this half of the top 10 as opposed to in the top half, because he lacked those, like you said, those key signature wins. He did have some, but they were in tag matches, and those, we consider those in terms of the star power that goes with, but like him and Ospreay beating the Young Bucks, well, I mean, that would be considered toward the tag team 100, and I don't think they don't have enough matches to qualify for
Anarchy in the Arena. I think he got the pin in Anarchy.
So he certainly still has the star power, but like ultimately you need like to establish yourself as a singles wrestler for this list, and that's you can debate about whether we should look at things differently, and maybe in the years ahead it'll evolve again a little bit, but that's how we look at it. And I get that even the most talented wrestler in the world, you've got to cycle them in and out of it's not even necessary. I do think that AEW should be criticized for maybe in some of these decisions, stuff like losing to Lashley, but I don't think it's necessarily a unforgivable sin that he moved down some after having a huge year the year before. You're not always going to, I mean, another guy who comes to mind is MJF, and you think about how much he's fallen, and maybe, and now it seems like he's back on the upswing, and maybe next year we see him high in this list again. So some of this is cyclical, but I do think Swerve is special enough that they really got to be careful. Like you don't want to let him lose too many in a row, and I'd say he already did. I mean, I don't think he was handled as carefully as they should have over the evaluation period. Yeah. And again, not the most unforgivable sin, but
sorry, Al, I think you talk about Jey getting back there. Swerve can and will get back there, but I think he's a victim of the kind of overcrowded roster that AEW has, and it's the opposite problem that WWE have, where they have 2 world titles in WWE that Jey Uso can absolutely get back there and get one of those. AEW only has 1, and so to get back into that scene is a much harder job and takes a lot more time and a lot more patience from the wrestlers and from the booking team as well.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's some of it, but I think the AEW main event scene, some of it is, I don't want to say needlessly crowded, but I think they are making decisions to put guys in main event spots that it's not that they don't deserve it. But look, over this year, we had Christian Cage, Adam Copeland, both in main event spots, and a few other guys who I'd argue were not the best calls to be headlining, challenging for the world title. And then you've got Swerve losing to Bobby Lashley in the mid card.
I'd argue even now, like And this is not a knock on Kyle Fletcher.
Kyle Fletcher headlining. Yeah,
Kyle Fletcher's great, and I think he's a future main eventer. But
I agree.
He also just got minted as TNT champ, so like let him do that. Let him like some. I mean, that title needs a little bit of help because it's been vacated. It's been where it couldn't be defended. Like, it's just so I think let him just dominate as TNT champion for a little bit. I just think it's premature from a momentum standpoint. It's not saying like he can't work a main event match. Sure he can. Like a lot of people can. Obviously Copeland and Cage can. Like they can work a main event match. It's not to say that like they don't belong in that spot. It's just a question of the what's that like cliche about the right seat on the bus and like have everybody in the right position at the right time. And
number 8, a guy who holds or ties the record, right, for the most number ones. I wonder if he gets back there next year. I think next year he could certainly make a run for it and make history. And that's Seth Rollins, and a guy who I think would be a lot higher if the evaluation period was a little different, but he won the world title just after the evaluation period. I think pound for pound, that cliche, the best worker in WWE. I mean, I just think he's terrific. I also think he's in the right spot. I don't think I don't think he's got everything that Cody has that makes Cody the face of WWE. But Seth is really holding it down as the workhorse, the most consistent guy, the guy who you put in a main event and is going to give you a terrific match every time out. And I think over the evaluation period upped his game outside the ring. Because I wasn't loving some of the visionary stuff for a long time. I think it's come together really well with Paul Heyman and the Vision and Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed and him in that leadership position. I think he has toned down some of the kind of cartoonish aspects of that character and made it a little more gritty. And it's just been really, really good, and he gets this high. Up until now, I believe he's the only guy who hasn't had a world title in the top 10. I know he had it, but he didn't have it in the evaluation period. So he earned the spot in the top 10 without a world title.
He's Bret Hart, to bring up that name again.
You say that, but he was the first guy I was going to bring up as Bret Hart. and there's a reason for that. And here's the parallel. What I think made Bret great was a chip on his shoulder, right? And it was that Bret was coming up at a time where, just after Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage and these larger than life stars, and even then was competing with guys like The Undertaker and Razor Ramon, who were 6'8" and huge. And he wasn't that guy. But because of that, I think he felt almost like a resentment or something that he had to prove. I'm better than all these guys. And I think we've seen that out of Seth Rollins for years. And I think the existence of guys like Cody and Roman Reigns and CM Punk, who are frankly all bigger stars than Seth, has driven Seth to, I'm going to outwork all you guys. And I think he's doing it.
Yeah, I think Seth really knows his place in WWE right now, and I think he's settled into that and is uber confident in everything he does, and it shows in his ring work, in his character work, on the microphone, in whatever he does. Even like his current role, and I know this hasn't really fed into the evaluation period we covered, but as being the leader of Vision with Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed, he has almost assumed that Triple H role from kind of the early mid 2000s. And I think he will take this as a project, as it's my job to get these two guys over as much as I can for the inevitable splits, because they're basically, I think, the new Randy Orton and Batista is how they're looking at this. And Seth is what Triple H was back then. And I think Rollins will take this as, this is my job, this is my mission, and he'll do everything he can to get those guys over.
I'll be interested in how they do in Faction of the Year voting.
Oh, yeah.
Division. Yeah, see how they do. How are we feeling, Kevin, about him on air with his wife, Becky? And I got to say, for all the compliments, I think Becky is, a Hall of Fame talent. I think she's a terrible heel. And I think some of like the cartoony stuff I've criticized, stuff that he mostly kind of washed out of the character, I think are coming back in because of his work with Becky.
Jason, well, I don't want to throw Jason under the bus. That's a bad scene.
Oh, throw.
But I was, we're talking the other day about Becky literally said, was it this week's Raw or last week's Raw? Literally said something just like all your sports teams. Come on, that's like, oh, I can't say the most cliche heel line of all time, can't I? I'll show you. Like it's just
how could somebody? Yeah, there are people who are better as heels, and there's people who are better as baby faces. There are here, and there are people who are like a little better than at one at the other.
Yeah.
It's unequivocal. I mean, she's a terrific baby face. Right? I mean, she's like an all-time great.
And I think her in-ring work as a heel is good. But the mic
awful, terrible baby face. I mean, it's it is like first year WWE developmental.
It's cartoonish.
Yeah. It's and I got to say, her last iteration as a heel wasn't that bad.
No, Big Time Bex was pretty good. This is I don't know what it is with this front.
Yeah, it's not working. Yeah. Anyway, we'll deal with that with the women's 250.
She's still going to do well because for ring work, like and championships. But that'll be later.
Yeah. Number 9, a guy who repeats. I think he was in the top 10 last year and was doing great in the top 10 20 years ago. Mystico, the former Singar. Some American fans will know him. I think one of like the really like compelling stories of wrestling, because 20 years later, he is not a better wrestler now than he was 20 years ago, right? And he's 20 years older, but it's like all of us, I don't want to say fans have discovered him, but he really has gone beyond being a popular wrestler or even like a big star to this sort of like cultural phenomenon in Mexico. I mean, and I think being here stateside, a lot of folks won't appreciate what a big deal he is in Mexico and in CMLL.
Yeah, I mean, well, just look at that his entrance with his old theme music.
Yeah,
at the Grand Slam Mexico. It was just like, and then you had fans that went and learned that song so they could sing along with it at All In when he came out for the Gauntlet. It's just so I think people are starting to get a taste of what he's meant in Mexico. And again, not for that whole stretch. There was, because he went back to WWE.
Yeah, that's odd. It wasn't a comeback. He's been there the whole time. Yeah,
right. Well, he left WWE and went back to Mexico.
Right.
He went through a couple of name changes.
Yeah.
He was teaming with the current Dralistico, who was then Mystico, and he was Caristico. It was very, very confusing if you're not following Lucha Libre closely, but it's just, and even if you are, it can be pretty confusing. But just he has gotten back to where he's the top star in CMLL, which is doing incredible business, selling out. Not just Arena Mexico, but selling out the smaller arenas that they run around the country as well for many weeks in a row, breaking records for that. And the top act, I mean, it's the Sky Team, which is Mystico, Mascara Dorada, and Neon. And then you have, but I mean, Mystico is like, he's the one who's kind of like not passing the torch, but I mean, he's the one who's he's the head of the babyface version of the Vision there, if you want to look at it that way. He's getting these two younger talent to this next level where they'll be looked on as stars for years to come and maybe decades to come. But he has just made these connections. He was MLW World Middleweight Champion for a good chunk of the evaluation period. He was defending that title all over the world. Matches in New Japan, matches in AEW. And again, CMLL. So he's just, it's really a sight to behold that he is, as you said, 2 decades later. He hasn't quite gotten, I think he was number 3 and number 5 at his peak. So he's not quite gotten back to that level. But you could argue that there's a tougher, it's tougher to get that high on the list at this point, because it's just this top 10 is really competitive. So even the fact that he is there and that he is the top star of his home country after all these years, it's really just inspiring.
I think the one thing that's really interesting about him, you mentioned him working in MLW and made some appearances in AEW. And I do think that you see it now with AAA and WWE. In Mexico, working in the United States and on U.S. television is always going to be a big deal and a goal for them. But I think the reality is that Mystico is giving more rub to American promotions and American wrestlers he's working with than the other way around, right? I mean, we talked about MJF and how much he's dropped off. I mean, I think one of the things that is propelling MJF back into the limelight and the top star is working with Mystico,
and he'll be, well, by the time this comes out, he'll have just had that big match at the anniversary show with him. So it's just huge.
I sort of wondered, like, why are you working in them? I mean, I don't know. MLW has something really special in being able.
They do, but MLW has been, obviously it's a lower level promotion. It has television, but it doesn't have the same level of television as other places. It's a smaller tier. We call it like a mid-tier promotion, I guess. But I mean, it is has a recognized world championship by PWI. It has some history to it.
Changed hands, right, over the weekend.
Yeah. It did. Cruel is the new champion last weekend, 2 weekends ago when this comes out. But we have, I think it has been doing really good business in that they go and they're not running these huge venues, but they're running similar venues to what TNA runs, and they sell them out. And I think a good chunk of the appeal there has been this relationship with CMLL and like having these lucha stars come in, and Mystico has been chief among them. So it really has been you can question like the reasons or the motives or whatever, but it has gone both ways. You had MLW guys in CMLL for a show as well. That got less publicity than when New Japan went down there. Even certainly not as much publicity as when AEW and Ring of Honor were down there, but like still a successful show, still just well received. So it's a cool thing, and it's great that Mystico is. Yeah, again, like you said, it's usually the other way around. Like a promotion will give additional exposure, and there's a certain amount of that where he's getting on American television, but he's really lending some international credibility to these promotions that he's working for.
And Jason, is it? I mean, you're helping compile these rankings. Is it too much to say that CMLL is the hottest promotion in wrestling? I mean, in here in the United States, I mean, we talk about like a boom period and fans coming out for WWE shows and being really riled up. I don't know that matches the excitement level that CML has seen in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to say anything other than WWE and AEW are still the two biggest companies in the world internationally visible. I think there's an argument to be made that CMLL has slipped into that spot that New Japan occupied for a few years there, whereas a really hot promotion that is getting a lot of attention with a lot of really good things happening, I think CMLL has almost taken that spot over now. I mean, I was trying to think of what a comparison to Mystico is, and I don't know, maybe it's like Lucha Libre's version of John Cena. If John Cena wrestled every night, I mean, that's how big of a deal this guy is. He is a big, big deal at a time when the promotion that he works for is exploding. So it's a big thing.
How much do you think, not to go too much off the rails, that WWE's acquisition of AAA and their kind of rebranding of AAA as sort of WWE Mexico helps or hurts in that rivalry with CMLL for dominance in Mexico?
I think it's good for everyone. I think it's it's no secret that CMLL's rise in the past few years has coincided with AAA going down the way in that time and really struggled, creatively from a business side. So I think WWE's trying to bring them back up, and I think it'll serve both of them well. I think, as long as the tourism boom that is helping CMLL keeps going and CMLL keeps, ticking those boxes that they're doing, I think it'll serve everybody very well, and it's good for the scene down there and good for international wrestling as a whole.
I wonder, Kevin, if Mystico's explosion in Mexico, and now WWE getting a foot in Mexico makes them make another play for him. But also, it's really like, it's almost comical. His history in WWE is not something that you'd. I mean, do you bring him back as Sin Cara? You know,
the thing is, they can't bring him back as Mystico because that character is owned by CMLL. So that's actually the challenge with bringing in. Like, you can bring in Stephanie Vaquer because she's just Stephanie Vaquer.
Yeah,
but you can't bring in Mystico. You can't bring in Mascara Dorada. You know, you
can
can't
buy
bring
it,
in.
I guess. But could you buy the rights, the name?
You think CMLL is going to sell the rights off to WWE that'll run them out of business? But no, come on.
Yeah,
it's not.
Anyhow, rounding out the top 10, and I think even my write-up of him, I mentioned, you know, here comes the hate mail, because to me, this is the guy that sort of, I feel like we hear about it every year, and that is Will Ospreay. And, you know, often the criticism is like, how is he not number one? Because he is the best wrestler in the world. And I believe he drops a few points this year from last year, makes it into the top 10. You know, I think there's no other way to say it. I think he has underachieved in AEW. I think he's a world-class talent. I think, you know, does nothing but put on great matches. And yet I feel like maybe that is the criticism, and that's the problem. He does nothing but put on great matches, you know. So it is both what brings him to the dance and maybe what is holding him down some.
I mean, I'll say it. I think it's his booking. I think they've not made the decision to really go with him for whatever reason, whether they're waiting for an opportune time, whether other people need to go first, whether they think that Ospreay being the number one guy in a year and a half will still be viable, whereas the time to strike. Like, okay, as an example, Bryan Danielson, the window was short. If you wanted to put the world title on him before he stepped away, you had to do it kind of then, because he was not able to keep wrestling. Right. But then you have someone like Ospreay. I guess the argument is, yeah, you could have him win it at Wembley next year and it would still be a huge deal. But I think that what them holding off on him for whatever reason, and some of it recently has been he's been injured. You know, like he just had surgery. So, you know, best of wishes to him in his recovery. Again, the list is not about who is the best, most exciting wrestler. It would be very similar every year. It would maybe switch around a little bit depending on who's having, like, quote unquote, the best matches, however you define those. But I always used to joke, like, if it was that, the list was that, it's like, okay, it's Danielson or Okada every year, or it's or Omega, or whoever you think is the most exciting guy. But, like, it's not going to be the way we do this, and it goes back 35 years, is based on performance. And yeah, the excitement of the matches and the stories that you're telling there, it is a significant part of it. But ultimately, if you're not winning the matches, if you're there to make someone else look better, like, okay, take like someone like a Brad Armstrong, right? Like, everybody talks about just like, oh, one of the best wrestlers you could get in the ring with. If you can't have a good match with him, you can't have a good match with anybody. Just an incredible, underrated worker. Was he ever going to be number one on the 500? No, because he's not positioned that way. And people will be like, well, why is he number one? Like, oh, well, don't you know how good he is? Like, it has to be shown in what they're doing in the ring. And obviously, the way Brad Armstrong was positioned versus the way Will Ospreay is positioned, it's a little different. But the reality is that Ospreay lost, as you said, with Swerve. He lost some key matches. He did not win the world title, you know, despite being put in position for it multiple times. He didn't win the Owen Hart Cup. These are not him being bad. Like, this is never us saying like, oh, this guy stinks out loud, that's why he's at number 10. Like, come on, that's not what this is. It's based on what they did during a particular evaluation period. And this year, his character, if you want to say that, underachieved. And you could argue whether he's ready for it or not. That's a different discussion. But I think just looking at what he did, it's hard to put him over any of these other wrestlers because of those key losses he had, because he did not have a world title, because he was not positioned as the star of the promotion, even if he arguably could have been.
Yeah. I think some of it is similar to Swerve, where there's a thought he's so good, right? He could take a few losses, and then before you know it, it's 6 losses in a row or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
yeah, now you're really kind of like got to dig yourself out of this hole. So they've got to be mindful of with him. I just looked up his age; he's 32, so still a young guy, but he's getting in. These should be his prime years. This is when you go with him. I don't think you want to wait too long. But I also have to say, I don't think it's just booking, and I think a lot of people disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But I do think that this gets back to that. Bidding war a couple years ago when WWE was in the market for Will Ospreay, and he went with AEW, and I think the thinking at the time, money aside, I'm sure money was a huge factor, but the thought was AEW is going to give him the stage and the platform to work the kind of match he likes to work. They will showcase that style more than a WWE would be, and I think that's been one of the biggest detriments in terms of him really growing. I think he's going out there every night and trying to pop Dave Meltzer, and looking for that next 6-star match, and everything is swinging for the fences, right? I mean, I don't think it's good for him, and I don't think we've seen the growth as a character, as a performer. And people will say, "What are you talking about? He gives these impassioned promos," and that's fine, but it's more than that, and some of it is also dialing it back, right? It is the less is more thing, and it just feels like if it is a collision match, with a modest live attendance and a modest TV audience, he is going to work like it is WrestleMania in the main event. And people will say, like, oh, how could you criticize that? That's what you want. And wrestlers say all the time, like, whether I'm in front of 100 fans or 100,000 fans, I give it my all. And that's fine. But the reality is that's not always true. And you should have gears, right? And you should recognize the difference between a lesser important match. And it's not to say you dog it in anything, but you've got your collision match and you've got your all-in match. And with Will Ospreay, it just feels like he is always, Spinal Tap 2 is out in theaters. He's always at 11, and he could, and when you hear veterans later in their career who make it big, and the question's always, if you could tell your 20-year-old self something, what would it be? And it's always like, dial it back. You don't have to do as much. And it feels like there's still some of that kind of like indie mentality with him, which is just throw everything in there, and it'll get you 10 6-star matches in the Observer this year. But I don't know what that's worth, and I think we haven't seen the growth out of Will Ospreay that we should be seeing at this age and this stage in his career. Jason, any thoughts?
I think just, I'll go back to what I said about Swerve as well. I think he's kind of a victim of the crowded scene there as well. If AEW had 3 world titles right now, Swerve, Ospreay, and Hangman could all hold one of them. I think they're all at that position. I think in terms of his ring style and how he works, the genie is out of the bottle. That is not going to change. Will Ospreay is never going to dial it down at this point. So for better or worse, this is him going forward. A year from now, we could be sitting here talking about him at number 1 in the PWI 500, and the 10 great matches that he had that were all 100 miles an hour, which is what he does. Or we could be sitting here saying the same thing again, that he's number 10 again. And
well, I think after the surgery that he had, though, I mean, does that necessitate maybe slowing down a little bit? And I don't even know what his timeline is for return. And I mean, that information could be out there, but I've been researching for this podcast. So.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, is it? And look, you never want that.
No.
But does something come out of it? Maybe, and maybe even in the long term prolong his career if he does change up his style. And I should point out he has some already. I mean, if you compare it to those Ospreay Ricochet days in New Japan 10 years ago, he dialed it down already some, and he bulked up and he became more of like a heavyweight style. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the next level now. It's sort of like what AJ Styles with his career. It's like you need to sort of adjust for the audience. But
I will say, I think if in as much as there's an argument for him to do that, and I think from a personal well-being standpoint, if nothing else there is, I think he's up to the task. I think he can do it. I think even just the switch in his work style over. like you said, it's already dialed down a bit. He's shown me more over the last few years than he did the years prior, and and he was arguably doing some even more impressive stuff, athletically speaking, in that before he built up, before he slowed down a tiny bit. But I think he's up to the task. It's just a question of, is he healthy? Can he get back in there and do it? He just had a pretty serious surgery. So again,
but also I think it requires some guidance in AEW.
Sure. Yeah.
And that veteran presence or even somebody at the top to tell him that. And to me, Will Ospreay is Tony Khan's kind of wrestler. I mean, this is what he wants. I mean, sure. he wants everything dialed up to 11 and everybody aiming for the 6-star match. And I think it's a detriment to the whole product. But I don't see, other than as you talked about, maybe health issues, much incentivizing him to change up his style. I mean, I think Tony Khan is just going to say, go.
I guess, the only thing that's going to tell how this shakes out is time. But
yeah. Anyhow, that's our top 10. So we've got a 490 to go. Strap in, everybody. for a while. No, I'm kidding, of course. But we could jump around. Well, one thing, and I feel like I do this every year, and I should take notes of what it was. But predictions for next year's number one.
Oh my God!
I'm going to go ahead and say Seth Rollins. I mean, I think if he stays on the course that he is, knowing what a great worker he is, knowing some big matches that could be up ahead of him and big programs ahead of him, I think that he could be the first 4-time number 1 ranked wrestler.
I'm going to go with Hangman Page. I think if he is in this for the long run, and if AEW view him as the guy that's going to carry this, I think absolutely we could be sitting here a year from now talking about the year that Adam Page had, where he really became AEW's homegrown star.
I am leaning towards Hangman myself. I'm going to throw in a wild card. I'm going to say Swerve Strickland.
Okay.
I think there's a scenario where he can turn it around, and where he can be. Again, he's going to need the backing of the company. He would need a world title run of some significance. Outside the box choice, boo, MJF.
Really? all these guys, maybe with
on the cusp. That's not a bit. This is booing MJF in the way he wants to be booed. Yeah, not a legitimate.
With both him and with Swerve, it would take a big reversal, of course, But both those guys, I'd say, on the right trajectory now. I mean, the line is moving up in the graph.
Which is all to say that it'll be Cody Rhodes again.
If you're a betting man,
count the man out.
If you're a betting man, it's the way to go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if I was actually putting money on it, that's what I would say. He's the biggest star in wrestling. Any other highlights here? 500. Who's this year number? People always say that.
This year's 500 is fun. It's Serial Man. Serial Man is based out of California. Wrestles primarily in the Hood Slam promotion, which is, we've done a feature on them in the magazine before, but it's Bay Area based promotion, has a lot of really outlandish, over the top characters. It is decidedly not for children, even though it has some of these silly characters. It's very much an adult audience. There's drinking and partying at the shows, but Serial Man was champion there for a good stretch. A veteran of, I think, about 15 years, called Serial Man because he's essentially a superhero with a cereal box shaped head. So I think a perfect number 500.
Yeah, I was going to say very, very much in keeping with the tradition of the 500.
Yeah.
Omissions, not that accidental omissions, but names that people will be surprised. You touched on it. John Cena. This is probably his last chance to be.
Yeah, I don't even think we specifically mentioned it, but he's if he had I think
one
more match. Yeah.
And in fact, he could have kept the same number of matches, but if he just moved one to a different month, right? Because I think he had 2 in May. So if he moved one, if he held off on one of those, this is where I think the policy and I sort of criticize it in my take. I also get what you're saying is you can only drop standards so much. And I think the original standard because I found the email that was and I was digging around emails and I found the email where we created the activity standard, and it was actually a lot higher back then. The original one I think was 20 and 12. and now we're down to, I guess, 10 and 6.
So
and
one match a month back then. Wow.
What's that?
It was one match a month back then?
20 in a year, or right, it would have been one match a month. Yeah, something like that. So
we really have dropped it then. I'm torn, and I think
the email was. Yeah.
Let's talk about this before next year. Like, let's revisit. I'm open to changing it because it does leave some key names out. But ultimately, I mean, this is a thing that's meant to reward the people who are being active. And you have some people who are out there wrestling.
I mean, how much more can you drop it in 6 matches? Yeah, I get it.
Yes, yeah, we have wrestlers out there. And I mean, these are not all singles matches, but you have some wrestlers in Japan that are wrestling 200 matches. You have some indie wrestlers in the US who are wrestling more than 100 matches. You have wrestlers in major promotions that are still wrestling dozens of matches. So it's and easily qualifying. So I think it's like, when you look at this, so you have John Cena, he did not qualify. Roman Reigns did not qualify. 3 singles matches. Also, I think even if you look at all of his matches, he was something like 3 and 4 for the year. Like, people are going to argue that he should be number 1. Like, he's not. Like, he comes on TV and he's a huge draw, but he's not wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's just not. It doesn't make sense the way we've always done this list to be that forgiving of the inactivity. And it's not. We've said this many times on the podcast. The man has earned it many times over. He has earned that schedule. He's put in the money, or to put in the hours, gotten the money behind the promotion by drawing all these fans, making new fans, converting fans, bringing back fans that have been gone. So it's, not begrudging Roman Reigns, but yeah, he doesn't qualify. Kenny Omega did not qualify. He did not.
Is that right? I wasn't aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was international champion. He fell short. Let me actually pull this up because I have, so Kenny Omega, just like John Cena, 1 match short or 1 month short. Missed a lot of time during the evaluation period, almost made it. Adam Copeland, not enough matches as well. So 6 matches in total, singles matches in total, 3 months of activity. Gran Guerrero, world heavyweight champion of CMLL, 2nd year in a row, not enough activity. He only had three singles matches.
Crazy.
Mr. Iguana, big star in AAA. He would have been great for somewhere on the list based on his influence and popularity, but 4 singles matches. Pac, 8 singles matches, 5 months of activity. Let's see who else. Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe only had 3 singles matches during the evaluation period, which I was shocked by.
Yeah. There's also guys who it wasn't an activity thing, and we should talk about them too. The one that I'm aware of is Finn Balor, right? Who I'm sure he wrestles plenty. Yeah. But just didn't do enough. And some of this is also the existence of the tag team list, right?
Sure. So Finn Balor was 0-12, I believe, in singles matches. He didn't win a singles match the entire event. So we discussed this, and I was talking to Jason about it, and he said, it is kind of hard to justify having a list of the top 500 wrestlers, and you put one in there who didn't win a single match. It doesn't make. And The Miz was 0-15. The Miz, former number 1. He's on every year. He's a huge star. He passes that airport test. There's no way he can go through an airport or a public space without everybody recognizing him. But he didn't win a match. Like,
it's also the heel problem again, right? It
is the heel problem for those guys, but it's not just heels, because you have Kyle O'Reilly actually. So he was kind of a tough omission, and we were off on the edge about this. But I think he was 2-7 for the evaluation period. And he beat Max Caster and Aaron Solo, I believe. So he essentially won 2 squash matches, and then he lost every other match. And, we look at Kyle O'Reilly, like, we can consider him for the tag team list as part of the Paragon. So it's just, there are other places where we can consider these guys, but does it make sense to have them be on?
Yeah, and Finn might be. And we haven't put together.
I think so. I think Finn will be on the tag list.
Even top 10 potentially.
Yeah, Kofi Kingston, another one. So Kofi Kingston was 2-6 or 2-7, and a lot of that was his singles losses were part of a storyline to kind of heat up the New Day again as a heel tag team. Look, that's not lost on us, but does it make sense to take that spot away from someone else when he's effectively not a singles wrestler during the period? Right. When you're looking at someone that wins 1 or 2 matches, it just, to me, we'll maybe look at that next year and it'll be a little different, and there will be exceptions. We had a couple of wrestlers who were sort of on the cusp. Like, I think Xavier Woods only won 3 singles matches, but we put him on the list, but he's not very high, Yeah. So this is just, and I get where people will disagree with this, and like we're open to feedback on that. It's not a hard and fast rule that you have to like have a winning record or anything like that to be on the list, but it's just something to consider if someone is not being positioned as a single star and they could be a candidate for one of these other lists, like the tag team list. Just look at that, you know. That's the way I see it.
Anyhow, another one in the books. Excited for people to start digging through it. Head on over to PWI-online.com and get it. So can you, when this drops, you could start reading this thing, right?
Yes, right away. Yeah, so you can actually grab the digital edition. There's a link in there to purchase. You can subscribe to the digital edition. We still have a sale going on for that. So if you sign up for that, you immediately get to start reading the digital edition for this current issue, and then you'll get the next date. Also, you can sign up. We have bundle subscriptions, and same deal. You'll get the digital edition delivered to you right away, and then, you know, from there you'll be able to continue reading it every month, and you'll get each new issue. The next issue coming out is the Women's 250 list. We have the Tag Team 100 coming up. We have our Achievement Awards at the end of the year. There's just always a lot of stuff going on, but this is a really busy time of year for us. And I think, you know, a very lot of eyes on PWI this time of year, for lack of a better word.
Are you nervous about, you know, inevitably, like, did you realize you left off so?
Oh yeah, always nervous about that. So the reason I mentioned some like Kyle O'Reilly and Kofi,
make it clear those are not accidental omissions.
Those are not, and it's not. If we're talking about wrestling ability, or like Kyle O'Reilly and Kofi Kingston are on there every year. If we're saying they're good performers, on there every year. It's just based on their performance during the evaluation period. Finn Balor, like, how could you leave a Finn Balor off if it's just about being a good wrestler? But it's not just about being a good wrestler. It's about
But sometimes some of these guys fall through the cracks for unintentionally, and
right. And if that's the case, hopefully it didn't happen this year. Last year we were thankfully. Hopefully we don't leave off Naito again. We did not leave Naito off again.
Naito's doing that, but he, I mean, look, this goes way back. I remember Owen Hart was left. You know, this is obviously 20 plus years ago, and you know, it happened to deal with 500 names and a lot of, you know, moving pieces on the board, and sometimes something falls through the crack. But hopefully that didn't happen here. All right, thanks so much. Very excited about this. Happy to dig into it and look forward to defending it in the coming weeks. Jason, thank you so much. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, just on the back of, we touched on it already, but please do check out, our website, PWI-online.com. You can check out the blogs there. You can check out the weekly ratings and just subscribe to everything we've got going, including the PWI weekly newsletter. Yep.
He's not here to do it, so I'll plug Brian's book on Gorilla Monsoon that is available now on Amazon, Irresistible Force. Go check it out. Kevin, thank you so much.
And thank you guys so much. I appreciate all your hard work and the two of my most reliable hands, if we're going to talk about steady hands.
Yes, tired hands from writing 500.
Oh, yeah, that.
And Al is the Bret Hart of the group.
Yeah, let's bring it full circle.
Excellent.